It wasn't that Yichen didn't believe Lu Muyen, but it took 5 days at the fastest to travel to and from Feng Hill City. It was possible she wouldn't make it back in time to apply acupuncture for Yi Qinglu. That's why he proposed that the Yi clan send someone there to pick Ling Fei Yang up. Don't worry, Uncle Yi. I'll definitely be back in 5 days. Lu Muyen knew what he thought in his heart, so she promised. And I haven't been to see maternal grandpa for a long time, so I wanted to go see him this time. Yichen also discovered through careful observations over the past few days that although Lu Muyen was young, but she was very responsible. Alright, then I'll trouble Lu girl to come back quickly. Lu Muyen checked Yi Qinglu again, and when there was no sign of any problems, she prepared to leave the Yi clan. Yi Qinghan, Mu Yi, and the others were also interested in the Tier 5 demonic beasts in Sunset Cloud Mountain Range, so they decided to go with her. That afternoon, the several people met in the main courtyard of the Yi clan. Mu Yen, how do we go? Yi Qinghan took out a spirit beast ring and said, I have a Tier 4 flying mount here which is faster than riding a tailwind horse. Lu Muyen ripped off the lazy Bing Ji from her shoulder and threw him to the ground. No worries, well use my spirit pet to fly. At his speed, we can reach Feng Hill City in less than a day. Although the cultivation base of Bing Ji was suppressed by Ming Xiu to Tier 6 demonic beast, but his flying ability wasn't affected as much. As long as he let free of his speed to travel, he would probably be dozens of times faster than a Tier 4 demonic beast. Of course, this thing was very lazy, so it'd be pretty good already if he could control his speed to arrive within a day. Little owner, you're beautiful and brilliant and lovely, so couldn't you be gentler? Bing Ji stood on the ground and glared at Lu Muyen, then pursed his lips and continued to say, if you keep not acting like a woman, be careful that man would. But he had yet to finish speaking when Lu Muyen choked his neck with elemental energy, her eyes filled with threats. The mouth of this stinky bird really was too cheap that he almost told everyone about Ming Xiu. Hurry up and change back to your original form. You must arrive in Feng Hill City in 1 day, otherwise I'll pluck all your feathers out. Lu Muyen said viciously. This stinky bird was just owing a beating. Bing Ji raised his head in dissatisfaction and still wanted to bargain, but when he saw Lu Muyen suddenly hold the golden ring in her hand to play with, he immediately shriveled. That thing was given to little owner by that damned man, but it just happened to be able to suppress his demonic energy. The most important thing was that it was able to bind his mouth to prevent him from talking. Wouldn't that suffocate him to death? He didn't dare to try to provoke Lu Muyen's prestige anymore. He knew that this woman usually looked easy to talk to, but when she was really angered, she'd definitely pluck out all his feathers. A 7-colored, dazzling bright light lit up. All Yi Qinghan and the others saw was the 7-colored parrot on the ground instantly turn into a tall and mighty, huge cyan blue-colored ice swan with smooth and shiny feathers. This is a descendant of a cyan swan. Mu Yi stared at Bing Ji with shock in his eyes. The pressure of a superior demonic race from the other party was too dense, only a divine beast could exude this kind of aura. Meanwhile, after Bing Ji revealed his original form, an elderly man and an elderly woman, who sat cross-legged in a secret area with dense spiritual force in the Yi clan, opened their eyes at the same time and looked in the same direction in surprise. This is the aura of a divine beast? The elderly woman said slowly. The elderly man pinched his fingers and swept his mental energy in that direction, then nodded and said, it turns out to be a descendant of the cyan swan. But it's just a Tier 6 ice swan. There were a few fluctuations in the elderly woman's calm eyes. Could it be a junior in the clan who contracted it? Wait as I ask. The elderly man took out a talisman and inserted some elemental energy. Then the talisman flew out with a shoo. The ice swan was an extremely rare demonic beast on Tianling continent, and was also a descendant of a divine beast. If a junior from the clan contracted it, then they could spend some energy to raise them. Not long after, Yichen respectfully stood in front of the two of them and reported what had occurred in the past few days, including the owner of the ice swan. You mean that the ice swan is the contracted spirit pet of that little girl who came here to cure Qinglu? The elderly woman asked without much expression. Replying to ancestor, indeed. The elderly man's eyes revealed a touch of interest. How could she, a little girl at the Sword King level, contract a Tier 6 descendant of a divine beast? There's a mysterious master behind the Lu clan's little girl. It is said that the person helped suppress the ice swan for her to forcefully contract. And the marrow cleansing pill that Qinghan had taken before was also given by the little girl. Yichen replied respectfully with a hint of protectiveness in his tone. The elderly man thought for a moment in silence, then said, after Qing's poison is cleared, you bring her to see us here in the secret area. Yes. Lu Muyen didn't know that the Yi clan's ancestors had interest in her. Currently, the several people were sitting on top of Bing Ji, drinking tea. Bing Ji's back could extend a lot and the feathers in the middle could even be erected to form a circle around them, sheltering them from wind and rain. So Lu Muyen thought that she might as well get Bing Ji to erect the feathers into the shape of a room. Then she placed a table on his back and took out some spiritual tea to drink. Bing Ji flew as he smelt the faint fragrance of tea and cried inwardly. Why did he have to work so hard and bitterly as a mount while those bastards could sit on him, drinking tea and chatting? Thinking of it, he regretted why his mouth and hands had to be cheap back then and tease that beautiful, red-clothed man. If that hadn't occurred, he would have snatched the heavenly frost golden crystal long ago and continued to live freely and easily in the glacial mountain range. The only thing that comforted him was that Lu Muyen was a generous owner and she was never reluctant nor pained when supplying he and the two other spirit pets with spars, spiritual herbs, and pills. Although those things weren't very effective for him as a tier 8 demonic beast, but he believed that one day, Lu Mu Yen, this little woman who was filled with mystery, could refine a high-level pill for him to have his fill. This was also one reason that he usually didn't go against Lu Mu Yan's orders. Using the words of that woman, this was a type of bet and he put all his chips on her. Bing Ji controlled his speed and flew slowly, fearing that it would scare the others if he were too fast, and arrived at Feng Hill City the next morning. Outside Feng Hill City, Lu Mu Yen told Bing Ji to return to his form as a 7-colored parrot. When entering the city, one also needed to pay a certain amount of entrance fees. After paying the fee, the several people headed straight to the city lord's mansion. Feng Hill City was also constructed to be very large, and its prosperity was not inferior to that of Luoxi City. Most sword masters walking on the streets carried long swords on their backs and the entire city gave a sense of remoteness and solemnity. But this wasn't surprising. It was just like Luoxi City of the Yi clan where spirit beast masters walking with demonic beasts could be seen everywhere. The Ling clan was well known for their sword skills, especially their ability to fly on swords at the Great Sword Master stage, showing the special characteristics of their sword skills. Most other sword masters could only barely use the plentiful elemental energy in their bodies at sword spirit stage to fly on the sword. In Lu Mu Yan's memory, she knew the route to the city lord's mansion. When the several people arrived at the city lord's mansion, they saw 2 guards standing at the door. "This is the city lord's mansion, please stop." One person stepped forward and said to the several people without any expression. Ever since Lu Mu Yen started chasing after Qi Yi Xian, she seldom followed her mother to Feng Hill City. It had been 5 years since the last time she came, so it was normal for the guards to not recognize her. She was just about to explain when, suddenly, a joyful voice sounded from the side. "Young Miss Cousin 1. Are you young Miss Cousin?" Translated product by Mayar Come True. "Young Miss Cousin. You're young Miss Cousin, right?" The voice of joy and excitement sounded, and Lu Mu Yen saw a sturdy old man walking towards them when she looked to the direction of the voice. Uncle Zhen. She recognized this man as the chief steward of the Ling mansion, and also an old man who had followed her maternal grandfather for many years. "It's really young Miss Cousin. 5 years have passed, you've really grown into a big miss." Ling Zhen walked to Lu Mu Yen and said with a smile. Compared to 5 years ago, the young Miss Cousin now had undergone earth-shaking changes. Not only did she have beauty that could cause the downfall of a country, but the change in temperament almost made him unable to recognize her. With an otherworldly and refined temperament, along with a sense of uninhibitedness and boldness, he had never seen a second young girl like this in the younger generation. "Uncle Zhen, is my maternal grandpa here?" Lu Mu Yen asked with a smile. "He's here. Who knows how many times Patriarch has thought of you before. If you want to come to the Ling clan, you should have sent a message and Patriarch could send someone to pick you up." Lu Mu Yen smiled lightly and said, "Isn't it so that I could surprise my respected grandpa?" "Huh, that's right. Patriarch will definitely be very happy to see you." Ling Zhen laughed happily, then seeing the few people standing beside Lu Mu Yen, he was stunned. He had only paid attention to young Miss Cousin just now and didn't expect that these 3 young lords also came. Young lords and third prince are truly rare guests. Please quickly come in. Ling Zhen curbed his affection for Lu Mu Yen and was very polite to the 4 of them. "Well, trouble elderly steward," Yi Qing Han said. After Ling Zhen led the group into the city lord's mansion, they went straight into the hall, and he ordered a guard next to him to invite Patriarch. Not long after the few people sat down in the hall, an old man who walked swiftly as if flying, with a ruddy complexion and who looked about 50 years old walked in. Behind him followed 2 middle-aged men and Ling Fei Hao. "I heard that my family's mischievous little girl is here." Before the person themselves even entered the door, his sonorous voice entered first. Lu Mu Yen stood up and greeted him with a lively smile. "Maternal grandpa really is a treasured sword that doesn't age, truly still elegant as usual. Even more energetic than paternal grandfather." "Huh, stinky girl. I haven't seen you for a few years and this mouth sure knows what to say now." Ling Hongzhua gazed at Lu Mu Yen softly and praised, "My family's stinky girl is naturally beautiful. Just how old are you and you're already so gorgeously beautiful? I wonder how many young talents would be enamored by you in the future." The corner of Lu Mu Yan's lips twitched and glared at him, shameless old man. Huh, stinky girl also knows how to be shy. Having not seen his granddaughter for many years, Ling Hongzhua missed her dearly, so the moment he saw her, he just wanted to joke around dotingly. Yi Qing Han and the 3 others immediately got up and greeted Ling Hongzhua formally. "Junior greets Patriarch Ling." "No need to be so polite. You all must be tired after following this stinky girl. I'll get some people to take you down to wash up and have a good rest." Ling Hongzhua's expression was harmonious. The 4 of them also knew that the Ling family and Lu Mu Yen had private things to say, so they all smiled and responded, "Then this junior will leave first." After the 4 of them left, Ling Hongzhua patted Lu Mu Yan's head lightly and said, "Little heartless stinky girl, only now do you remember to come see maternal grandpa." Lu Mu Yen also knew that her maternal grandfather's temperament was more like an old naughty boy than her paternal grandfather, so she smiled and wrapped her arms around his, saying, "Before, I was trash, so I was afraid that I'd blacken maternal grandfather's name. Now that I've washed away the name of trash, I've come to see you, my respected grandpa, and make you happy too." "You stinky girl. When did I ever feel disgust towards you being trash? Whether you're trash or whether you're a genius, you're all my, Ling Hongzhua's, granddaughter." Ling Hongzhua was helped by Lu Mu Yen to sit in the main seat. Lu Mu Yen stood next to him respectfully and smiled, saying, "Yes. Of course I'm your granddaughter any time. Isn't it all just because I wanted to give you a pleasant surprise? No pleasant surprise, but there sure are a bunch of shocking terrors. Ling Hongzhuo rolled his eyes at her without a good attitude. Lu Muyen also didn't mind and giggled merrily to gloss over the situation, then addressed the two middle-aged men who entered the door last, second maternal uncle, third maternal uncle. Muyen has really grown up. No wonder they say that when women grow they change 18 times 1. Lu Muyen's second maternal uncle, Ling Ziming, praised with a smile. Lu Muyen used to be a domineering and willful little girl. Who knew that it had only been 5 years' time and she'd grow to look so slim and graceful with an outstanding temperament? Where's little maternal uncle? Lu Muyen had 4 maternal uncles in total. The most awesome and powerful maternal uncle was missing, second maternal uncle and third maternal uncle were relatively more mediocre, while little maternal uncle was also an active and influential figure. Your little maternal uncle traveled to the southern region. Third maternal uncle Ling Ziwen said. Ever since the conversation with Yi Zhan, Lu Muyen also had a broader, general understanding of Tianling continent. She furrowed her brows and said, isn't it dangerous to travel to the southern region? He's already an adult. If he wants to venture into the world, then let him. It's useless to try to detain him. Ling Hongzhuo waved his hand dismissively and said indifferently. When one's son grows up, their heart grows wild. Especially his youngest son and eldest son who were both outstanding talents. It was a waste to detain them in this small world that was the Ling clan. Lu Muyen thought a bit, then nodded, that's true. Little maternal uncle's that smart, so he should be fine. Stinky girl, let's talk, what's the main purpose of you coming to the Ling clan this time? Ling Hongzhuo looked at Lu Muyen with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. He had long heard that this girl had changed, but he didn't expect the change to be so big. But this was fine too, this way, she wouldn't be bullied by others. Of course I'm here to visit maternal grandpa and my maternal uncles. Lu Muyen said with a smile, confident and justly, I learned a medical skill and I also came to remove the poison for elder cousin brother Fei Yang. Stinky girl, I also heard that you're an alchemist now, but the poison in Fei Yang's body isn't that easy to cure. Mentioning his most highly thought of grandson, Ling Hongzhuo's face grew sullen. After Ling Fei Yang was injured and poisoned, he had invited a number of physicians and alchemists to come for treatment. It wasn't easy to completely get rid of the poison, but they hadn't completely given up yet. Maternal grandpa, the little princess of the Yi clan, Yi Qinglu, you all know of her, right? Naturally we know. That child is also pitiful. She had been tortured by the fetal poison since young, and they also invited who knows how many physicians and alchemists, yet still couldn't be cured. Although the poison in her body hasn't been completely eliminated, but soon it will be. Lu Muyen said. What? Ling Hongzhuo exclaimed in disbelief. Even Ling Ziming and Ling Ziwen revealed gazes of incredulity. Yi Qinglu's fetal poison was known among the 10 distinguished clans as extremely difficult to cure. Not long ago, there was even news that spread that she wouldn't live past 18 years old. Who would have thought that it was mostly cured now? Who has that ability to cure that kind of fetal poison? Ling Hongzhuo's tone appeared to carry some excitement. If that kind of domineering and powerful fetal poison could even be cured, then the person who cured it must have exceptional medical skills. Ling Ziming and Ling Ziwen both watched Lu Muyen expectantly, waiting for her to speak. Lu Muyen chuckled lightly, pointed her finger at herself and said, seemingly far in the horizon but actually right in front of you too. Translated product. Seemingly far in the horizon but actually right in front of you. Lu Muyen smiled and pointed to herself as she said to them, her eyes gleaming with light, emanating a brilliant self-confidence that startled them. Is what stinky girl, you're saying true? Ling Hongzhuo reached out and flicked Lu Muyen's forehead. It wasn't that he didn't believe in his granddaughter, but it was just too unbelievable. An old ancestor of the Mu clan couldn't even get rid of the poison, but his granddaughter can cure it? Ling Ziming also smiled helplessly and said, Yenner, don't joke with us anymore. Lu Muyen looked at the sky speechlessly. In fact, when she treated Yi Qinglu, everyone also just had an attitude of giving it a try. They didn't show it on the surface, but they didn't believe. Though this was normal. After all, her age was still too young right now. Maternal grandpa, second maternal uncle, third maternal uncle, you've also seen Yi Qinghan and the others come with me. This shows that I don't have a shallow relationship with him. After a pause, Lu Muyen added, I need to rush back to give Yi Qinglu acupuncture in 5 days, so this time I also specifically came to take elder cousin brother Fei Yang to the Yi clan for treatment. A month later, he'll be going to participate in the continental tournament for hegemony. Is this true? A stormy sea tossed about in Ling Hongzhuo's heart, but when he saw his granddaughter's radiant eyes, he couldn't help but to believe, all right. I believe Yenner will definitely cure Fei Yang's illness. Ling Ziwen remembered the look in Yi Qinghan's eyes when he looked at Lu Muyen before he left, and also felt that the relationship between the two was indeed not simple. If that's the case, then it'd be excellent. They all saw the pain Ling Fei Yang suffered in the past few years and they also never gave up treatment. If Lu Muyen could really cure him now, then it'd be a happy thing for everyone. I want to go see elder cousin brother Fei Yang now. Lu Muyen said. Ling Fei Hao recovered from the shock and immediately stepped forward, took her hand, and quickly pulled her out the door. As he walked, he yelled to the others inside, I'll bring Yenner to find eldest brother. Watching the back of the two leaving, Ling Ziming said with a complicated expression, I wonder if Muyen can really cure Fei Yang. The girl has already changed. I believe her. Ling Hongzhuo stroked his beard and said firmly. Lu Muyen had changed a lot since she was injured by the person from the Gu clan last time. He had heard of many things as well. If there wasn't some fortuitous encounter, then it was definitely impossible. The little girl's medical skills were even more amazing. He believed that the mysterious master behind her doted on her very much, and he was willing to believe that his granddaughter wouldn't lie. Lu Muyen followed Ling Fei Hao to a secluded, quiet courtyard at the back. After they pushed open the courtyard gate, they saw a garden with flowers in full bloom, as brilliant as brocade, filled with the scent of spring. Following a path to the end was a maple forest. The red maple leaves whirled in the air and fell with the wind as the sun shone through the dense maple leaves, reflecting scattered, warm light. There was a stone pavilion in the depths of the maple forest. From a distance, they could see a man in a wheelchair holding a book and savoring it. Elder cousin brother Fei Yang ordered someone to plant this maple forest. Lu Muyen remembered that this yard didn't have this scenery when she came 5 years ago. Ling Fei Hao sighed. Ever since eldest brother couldn't walk anymore, he fell in love with planting flowers and trees. This red maple forest was planted by himself. Lu Muyen swept the area of the red maple forest, pondered for a bit, then said, "It can be seen that elder cousin brother Fei Yang actually hasn't given up on himself. He has always had hope in his life. Otherwise how could he plant red maple trees that represented endurance, forging ahead ceaselessly and the love of life? Although eldest brother has been paralyzed for so long, but I've never seen sadness on his face. He's always bearing it quietly, which makes my heart hurt. Let's go, he's discovered us." Seeing Ling Fei Yang, who was originally reading the book, lift his head, Lu Muyen walked over with a gentle smile on her lips. Ling Fei Yang was older than her by 5 years. When they were children, every time she came to the Ling clan, he would take her to play around, tolerating and spoiling her. She had a lot of affection for this elder cousin brother. After walking in, Lu Muyen saw that the young man in the wheelchair had handsome features, was elegant and cultured, carrying a bookish air which made people develop a favorable impression of him even at first sight. "Yener is here." Ling Fei Yang's voice was like tinkling spring water, clear and graceful, very pleasant to the ears. Lu Muyen smiled. "Elder cousin brother, long time no see. Yener has grown into a big girl now." Ling Fei Yang revealed a doting smile and was truly fond of this younger cousin sister of hers with all his heart. Lu Muyen walked to the other side of him and sat down, then poured herself and Ling Fei Hao some tea upon smelling the fragrance of the tea. Ling Fei Yang raised his lips with a gentle smile, his temperament as gentle as jade. His eyes were pure black, as if a peaceful land that had never been contaminated, clean and comfortable. "What book is elder cousin brother reading?" Lu Muyen shifted her gaze to the book in Ling Fei Yang's hand. Ling Fei Yang chuckled and handed the book to her, "A book that can help my heart be calm like water." Lu Muyen took the book and scanned the pages. This was a Buddhist scripture. The scriptures within were rather deep and profound. Lu Muyen could see that this seemingly ordinary Buddhist scripture was actually a manual. Can eldest cousin brother comprehend the true meaning of the Buddhist scripture? I only understand the surface of things. The true meaning is too profound. I only have a superficial understanding. Ling Fei Yan's eyes were bright. Yener knows the true meaning of this Buddhist scripture. I don't know. Lu Muyen shook her head and said, "But I believe that if elder cousin brother thoroughly comprehends this Buddhist scripture, then you'll definitely obtain unexpected benefit." "What sign language are you two speaking in?" Ling Fei Hao took a sip of tea and flipped through the Buddhist scriptures randomly, then asked in confusion, "Isn't this just an ordinary Buddhist scripture? What unexpected benefits can you get?" "I actually think eldest brother is better off reading it less, otherwise you'll almost become a monk without any desires." Ling Fei Yang laughed when he heard his words. "The difference between you and Yener really isn't just a little bit. Elder cousin brother Fei Hao, your personality is only suited to gossip about the secrets of the men in the 10 distinguished clans. Such deep questions aren't suitable for you." Lu Muyen also laughed aloud, teasing. Ling Fei Hao wasn't stupid. He naturally heard from their words that the two of them felt that he was too hasty, so he huffed, "It's so unkind of you two to unite and ridicule me." Haha. Lu Muyen and Ling Fei Yang couldn't help laughing aloud. After a while, Ling Fei Yang personally raised the teapot to fill Lu Muyen's cup. Why did Yener suddenly come to the Ling clan this time? After Ling Fei Hao brought back news that Lu Muyen could have fallen at the glacial mountain range, the Ling clan felt exceptional grief. Fortunately, the news that she had returned to the Lu clan safely was received not long ago, which helped everyone walk out of that grief. This time she came to the Ling clan quietly without any news, so there must be some situation. Lu Muyen looked at him with a smile and said, "Naturally to come and treat elder cousin brother Fei Yang's illness." This sentence instantly dropped a stone in the originally calm lake of Ling Fei Yang's heart, beginning waves upon waves of ripples. Ling Fei Yang's calm, black eyes were filled with deepness that others couldn't understand. When he heard Lu Muyen's words, his heart was uncontrollably beaten. Ever since he was paralyzed and in a wheelchair, he had never given up the hope of continuing to survive. But as time went by, after countless physicians and alchemists came and went, the final result had always been helplessness. It had been 3 years. From the initial anticipation and excitement, to the calmness of his heart now. He just never expected that one sentence could make his dried-up heart slowly come alive as if it had been watered. "Yener, how would you treat me? Let me take a look at the poison in your body first." Lu Muyen placed her teacup down, reached out to hold Ling Fei Yan's wrist, and checked quietly. Lu Muyen felt Ling Fei Yang's arteries, then extended a sliver of mental energy and spiritual energy with some green mist into his body to check bit by bit. The meridians weren't blocked, and although the cultivation base was slow because of the poison, it didn't stop either. She probed deeper. After a while, her willow brows furrowed together unconsciously. There was a trace of black energy wound around the dantian with a disgusting aura of death. Passing the dantian, she headed towards his thigh and found that all the poison in Ling Fei Yang's body had been suppressed by the ancestor of the Mu clan in the calves. Taking a look with her mental energy, the meridians of the calves had already begun to show signs of deterioration, the bone and blood had long been stained dark red, and traces of poison like black threads continued to coil around. She retracted her hand and sighed. Elder cousin brother Fei Yang has been tortured a lot in the past few years. At least more than 10 hours a day, your calves would be in extreme pain. Ling Fei Yang smiled faintly, used to it. Hearing his calm words like the wind and clouds, without any fluctuations in emotions, Lu Mu Yen couldn't help but feel sour in her heart, as well as admiration. This kind of poison wasn't only very poisonous, but it had also been cursed. The black threads circling the dantian and the calves were the resentments produced by an evil spirit that were refined by the devil cultivator. Her eyes gradually cooled. Elder cousin brother Fei Yang, is the person who poisoned you still alive? Do you still remember what he looks like? Alive. He injured me, but I also heavily injured him. But I'm sure he won't be in life-threatening danger. Ling Fei Yang paused, then said, I'll remember his appearance even if he turned to ashes. When Lu Mu Yen saw Ling Fei Yang mentioning the person who put him in such pain that made one wish he was dead, there wasn't much resentment on his face. She sighed inwardly that this elder cousin brother's temperament truly had been toughened a lot over the years. He probably also understood the majority of that scripture. But this also had its advantages. In the future, when the poison in his body was removed, with Ling Fei Yang's current character and composure, his future achievements would definitely not be low. Good fortune laid within the bad and bad fortune lurked within the good. When elder cousin brother has time, please paint a portrait of him for me. Lu Mu Yan's voice was grim. What does Yenner want his portrait for? Ling Fei Yang asked in a daze, puzzled. Lu Mu Yen raised an eyebrow with a rare sternness between her brows, naturally so that we can deal with the person as they've dealt to you, making him live worse than death. Ling Fei Yang didn't expect Lu Mu Yen to say such words, and a warmth rose on his handsome face. Yenner, your temper sure has become bolder and more domineering having not met in a few years. If you owe a favor, you must repay it, and if you have feuds, then you must repay it hundredfold. This is how I deal with things now. Lu Mu Yen raised her head and smiled. Regardless of whether it was her past life or present, dealing with situations using this law had been deeply engraved into her soul. That's very good. Ling Fei Yang had admiration in his eyes. Yenner should be like this. You won't be bullied by others in the future. That's right. In the future, only I'll bully others. And if others want to bully me, then I'll peel off a few layers of their skin. Lu Mu Yen raised her chin, looking very much tsundere. Ling Fei Yang watched her amusedly. Yenner's temperament is very good right now. Only in this way could she survive in this world where strength was respected. Elder cousin brother, how much do you know about the poison in your body? Lu Mu Yen thought for a bit then asked. I only know that there's a vicious blood curse in the poison that the devil cultivator cast, but it's also precisely because of this curse that all the physicians and alchemists who have taken a look at me couldn't treat it. Ling Fei Yang said. Lu Mu Yen nodded. This kind of iniquitous skill is refined using the evil spirit's resentments. After mixing it with poison, it's indeed difficult to cure with pills or medicines. Hearing Yenner's tone, you understand this sort of iniquitous skill? Ling Fei Yang's dull eyes revealed more expectancy. Not only do I understand, but I can also cure this kind of blood curse. She understood these things really thanks to when she turned into a mortal and traveled to that place that prospered in goo poison and curses and learned of it. Ling Fei Yang was slightly startled. Before he could speak, Ling Fei Hao grabbed Lu Mu Yan's arm and said excitedly, Yenner, can you really cure the blood curse in eldest brother's body? But because this blood curse is very insidious, I have to prepare some things and arrange an array before I can do anything. After the blood curse is resolved, it'll be much easier to remove the poison in elder cousin brother Fei Yang's body. This type of curse contained the curse giver's blood essence and resentment, so it was very troublesome to resolve. Ling Fei Yang nodded with a smile and said, as long as I can dispel the curse and poison in my body, then I'm willing to try any method. I believe in Yenner. Don't worry elder cousin brother Fei Yang, I'll make sure you stand up again. Lu Mu Yen smiled and that self-confidence that scorned the heavens was unconsciously revealed again. Ling Fei Yan's heart moved. Mu Yen, this little girl, really was different. No matter whether it could be cured or not, he believed that she'd do her best. Yenner, then when will you start to remove the curse for my eldest brother? Ling Fei Hao controlled his excitement and asked. I'm currently removing poison for Yi Qing Lu in Luoxi City. Elder cousin brother Fei Yang's situation with poison is somewhat similar to hers. I came this time to bring elder cousin brother back to the Yi clan for treatment together. Lu Mu Yen said bluntly. Although Ling Fei Yang and Yi Qing Lu were inflicted with different poisons, but they both needed medicated baths to soak in. In treating them together, 1, they would be able to encourage each other, and 2, it was also more convenient for her to prepare medicinal liquids and apply acupuncture. Ling Fei Yang was silent for a moment, then lifted his head and asked, the Yi clan rarely interacted with the Ling clan. If I went to Luoxi City for treatment, will it affect their neutral attitude that they've maintained? It won't. I've already discussed it with the patriarch of the Yi clan. Lu Mu Yen had thought of this layer long ago, so what if it's affected? Even the Yi clan's not afraid, what are we afraid of? I was thinking too much. As expected, Yenner is a perceptive person. Ling Fei Yang lowered his head and smiled. Lu Mu Yen was right. The Ling clan was currently suffering from internal and external troubles, so what was there to worry about? Since the Yi clan's patriarch dared to let him go to Luoxi City for treatment, then he was probably prepared to be dragged into the water together. Elder cousin brother is a smart person, you've just been too scrupulous before. In fact, the three clans of Yi, Shi, and Mu are already secretly united, and the Xian, Shui, and Lu clan have also formed an alliance. They've long broken the rule that the 10 distinguished clans can't join forces together unilaterally. We naturally don't need to follow it anymore either. Lu Muyen said. Ling Fei Yang's white and slender fingers tapped on the wheelchair's armrest lightly and gradually saw the direction where the Ling clan should be headed for in the future. Translated product by Mayar Come True. Note, welp, wasn't it that in chapter 62? Seeing that Ling Fei Yang had sunk into thought, Lu Muyen also didn't bother him. As the future heir to the Ling clan that had been decided long ago, he had already taken on heavy responsibilities now, and she knew that he was willing to do things for the Ling clan. Yener, why do you know so many things now? Ling Fei Hao remembered the pills and drug powder that Lu Muyen stuffed them in the glacial mountain range and couldn't resist asking. Lu Muyen thought for a while, then repeated what she said to the Lu clan. I entered a dreamland after being injured by Gu Yanran. In the dreamland, I went to a continent that didn't exist here and I stayed there for a long time, so I also naturally learned a lot of things. Your alchemy skills were also learnt in that continent? Ling Fei Hao paused, then asked slowly. Indeed. Who in the Ling clan that she could trust, she knew in her heart, so she didn't conceal anything. They're all relatives who were exceptionally good to her and they're also the family she was determined to protect. Ling Fei Hao's eyes widened and said, so that means the mysterious master behind you is all fake? Basically. Lu Muyen smiled, then said to him gravely, but you're not allowed to tell anyone. Ling Fei Hao rolled his eyes at her, and the corner of his lips couldn't stop rising. You think we're fools, huh? You definitely can't tell anyone about something like this, otherwise trouble will come. If other people knew that there was no mysterious master behind Lu Muyen and everything she knew came from her fortuitous encounters in that dreamland, then there would definitely be a lot of people who would covet it. There may even be powerhouses who would do some despicable and sinister things to want to take it for themselves, such as soul searching. As long as you know. You're all my most trusted family, so I won't hide it from you. Lu Muyen smiled softly. Ling Fei Yang and Ling Fei Hao both revealed a touch of being visibly moved. This kind of trust made their heart very warm. Good Yener, then did you refine the marrow cleansing pill yourself? Ling Fei Hao asked, rubbing his hands. Lu Muyen took out 2 porcelain bottles and tossed it to them, looking at him amusedly and said, of course I refined it. I wanted to give them to you before going to the glacial mountain range, but I was afraid that someone would find out and cause trouble, so I left it till now. Yener, you're too awesome. Ling Fei Hao took the porcelain bottle carefully and put it away. Lu Muyen could even refine a pill of such a grade and with such heaven-defying power. There were indeed some fortuitous encounters in the dreamland, but it also meant that her talent was extremely abnormal. If it were him who entered, without that talent, even if he knew the pill formula, he wouldn't be able to refine it. The conditions for beginning an alchemist were actually very harsh. First, one must comprehend the fire elemental energy law, otherwise they wouldn't be able to use fire to refine pills. Second, one must be able to comprehend the wood elemental law. Only then could one better comprehend the essence of refining spiritual herbs. The reason why alchemists on Tianling continent were so rare was because there were so few people who met these 2 conditions. I've just got some better luck. Lu Muyen smiled in a rare display of modesty. Luck is also a part of strength. If Yener hadn't been able to comprehend the dual attributes of fire and wood elemental energy law, then you wouldn't have been able to turn an opportunity into strength. Ling Fei Yang returned from his thoughts, rubbed the white porcelain bottle in his hands and said with a faint smile. Lu Muhan smiled and lifted her chin, that's only natural. Just look at from which clan I've come from. The Lu and Ling clans didn't lack prodigies the most. She actually didn't say those words because she was arrogant and conceited. The Lu and Ling clan's pupils did indeed have many talented heirs, but their development was restricted only because of resources and other practical conditions. If these people were moved to the distinguished clans of the southern and northern regions, she believed that after they came out, even if they wouldn't be a major influence in one area, but they wouldn't be worse than pupils that came from certain big clans who were piled up with drugs and excelling resources. Yener is indeed very good. Ling Fei Yang said, chuckling. Such a Lu Muyen was very lively, bold, and self-confident, which was very likable. They chatted again for a long time before leaving this red maple forest. The second day, Lu Muyen accompanied her respected grandfather for a day, then wandered around Feng Hill City with Yi Qing Han and the others. Early the third day, they bid farewell, sat on Bing Ji, and flew towards the 3 danger areas of Sunset Cloud Mountain. Looking at the Isolon that disappeared in the yard, Ling Ziming had yet to recover. Yener actually contracted a tier 6 descendant of a Cyan Wan, it truly is surprising. Haha, Ling Hongzhua laughed merrily, Yener is naturally the best. Yesterday when Lu Muyen gave him 10 marrow cleansing pills, it almost frightened him to unconsciousness. When he knew that she refined it herself, he was even more stunned and couldn't say a word. So it turned out that his family's Yener had experienced that kind of fortuitous encounter, that's why she had changed so much. This was a great fortune. And it was also as the divine seer had said, Lu Muyen was reborn after dying. Her future prospects were unlimited, so it shouldn't be surprising that she was able to contract a descendant of a divine beast. The Ling clan's brothers naturally also found out about Lu Muyen's fortuitous encounter and also couldn't resist nodding in agreement. They only hoped that when Fei Yang returned this time, his legs had already recovered the ability to walk. Bing Ji deliberately suppressed his flying speed and maintained the flight speed of a tier 6 demonic beast, but it was still very fast. It didn't even take 4 hours before he stopped in front of their first danger area in Sunset Cloud Mountain Range. Looking at the misty mountain forest ahead, Lu Muyen revealed some interest on her face. This mist could even block out mental energy. Interesting. Didn't they say that there are 3 danger areas in Sunset Cloud Mountain Range? Where are the other 2? After scanning the misty forest, Lu Muyen asked Yi Qinghan and the others. Ling Feiyang sat in his wheelchair pushed by Yunlan, his eyes deep. The 3 danger areas in Sunset Cloud Mountain are all connected together, and after entering this misty forest, each group of people may all appear in different places. All different? Lu Muyen asked curiously, turning around. This misty forest is the only way to the 3 danger areas, and the 3 danger areas could all move, so it depends on time and luck to see which one you'll fall on. Ling Feiyang said indifferently. You mean to say that the 3 danger areas are constantly shifting and changing positions? Lu Muyen raised an eyebrow. That's also to say we might set foot on the area with tier 9 demonic beasts? Yes, it's indeed possible. Ling Feiyang nodded. Lu Muyen raised her head and looked at the misty forest not far away. She couldn't even penetrate it with her mental energy. The Sunset Cloud Mountain Range was indeed very mysterious. If you're unlucky to set foot on the place where the tier 9 demonic beast is located, wouldn't it mean you'll definitely die? She just felt that it wasn't that simple. Otherwise, who'd dare to enter this misty forest easily, and who'd be able to guarantee that their luck would be so good that they'd definitely not encounter a tier 9 demonic beast? Bing Ji, who had already turned into a 7-colored parrot, stood on her shoulder and sneered. Is a tier 9 demonic beast so easy to meet? There being a tier 9 demonic beast here is just a legend. Even if it exists, he wouldn't bother appearing and killing you low-level humans. High-level demonic beasts had their own pride, let alone a tier 9 demonic beast that's at an even higher level than him. Of course, he was also very curious about what kind of demonic beast race the legendary tier 9 demonic beast was, so it wasn't bad if they accidentally met. Translated product by Mayar Come. Do you all think tier 9 demonic beasts are that easy to encounter? Bing Jis sneer echoed in the ears of the several people. Can't you use your demonic sense to feel whether there's a demonic beast stronger than you in there? Lu Muyen telepathically asked Bing Ji. Bing Ji pursed his lips. Half of my demonic energy was sealed by that kid, so my demonic sense naturally couldn't penetrate it either. Lu Muyen chuckled at his tone. Even if he didn't seal your demonic energy, your demonic sense can't penetrate that layer of fog, right? Bing Ji froze. Cough. That layer of fog is a natural barrier, so even if the tier 9 demonic beast is here, it'd be unable to spy. Lu Muyen no longer communicated telepathically to him, and asked the several people with a smile on her lips, do you all still want to go in? What's Muyen's plan? Yi Qinghan asked with some interest on his face. Naturally, to go in and take a look. There's no reason to shrink back after coming. Lu Muyen said. Sure. Feng and Mu Yi also had never entered the 3 dangerous areas, so at this time, they were filled with interest. Lu Muyen, a little girl, wasn't even afraid. They were even less so. Although Ling Feiyang sat in a wheelchair, but his cultivation base still remained at Sword King. He smiled softly and said, let's go in and take a look. Yunlan naturally wouldn't object, so he pushed Ling Feiyang into the foggy forest with the few people. There wasn't anything like poisonous gas when entering the foggy forest, and instead, the spiritual force inside was much denser than outside, while it was still a foggy scenery up ahead, unable to see what's in front. Everyone be careful. Yi Qinghan found out that after entering the foggy forest, his mental energy still couldn't detect his surroundings, so he cautiously said to the few people. Lu Muyen thought for a bit, then released Mo Yen. Do you know this kind of foggy forest? Mo Yan's indifferent eyes swept the surroundings, then telepathically said, this is a natural spiritual force barrier that can isolate all probing of mental energy and demonic sense. But the demonic beasts deep in the forest can still discover all your presences. Is there really a tier 9 demonic beast here? Lu Muyen thought that since there were such rumors, it shouldn't be too distorted. Mo Yen said, naturally there is. He's paying attention to all your movements at this moment. What? Lu Muyen was stunned, then asked, how did you know that when you can't use your demonic sense to probe the fog? Although the demonic sense can't penetrate into the foggy forest, I can still feel a very faint demonic sense currently cast towards us. All your movements can't escape his eyes. Mo Yan's tone carried a rare trace of gravity. Lu Muyen furrowed her brows and said, then aren't we just voluntarily sending ourselves to his door for him to slaughter? Is it really the aura of a tier 9 demonic beast? I'm certain it's definitely a tier 9 demonic beast spying. As for slaughtering you guys, I don't think that's likely. There's no killing intent in his aura. Mo Yen paused, then said, you're just catching a few tier 5 demonic beasts, you won't anger him. As long as you don't step into the range of his core territory, then it's fine. Is this the pride of you, demonic beasts? Lu Muyen asked, remembering Bing Jis' words. Mo Yen glanced lightly at the ostentatious 7-colored parrot on Lu Muyen's shoulder, then said, it's not necessarily that every demonic beast is unbending and proud, but for most high-level demonic beasts, they follow such a principle and aren't as calculating as humans. Mo kid, why did you look at this little master one when you said the first part? Bing Jis' voice sounded in Lu Muyen's sea of consciousness. Lu Muyen's ancient contract skill was different from the beast-taming skill of this continent. All demonic beasts could communicate on their own in the sea of consciousness, so Mo Yan's words were naturally heard by Bing Ji. Mo Yan looked at him coldly. I mean precisely you, what will you do? This bird talked in Lu Mu Yan's sea of consciousness all day, it was just too noisy. Humph, this little master won't lower myself to the same level as you, a tier 5 demonic beast. Bing Ji found that Mo Yan's gaze was too horrifying and also knew that the other party's bloodline talent was much purer than him as a descendant of a Cyan Wan, so every time they fought, there was always a pressure. Offending this Mo kid definitely was more awful than offending owner. Even if Mo Yan's tier 5 now, you probably still won't be able to beat him with you currently suppressed at tier 6. Lu Mu Yan raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, speaking more favorably about Mo Yan. After all, Mo Yan was a high-level demon cultivator that had recultivated. He had broken through from tier 1 all the way to tier 5 in such a short time, and his cultivation speed was much faster than hers. Bing Ji, this dabbler divine beast, simply couldn't be compared to him. Moreover, in terms of experience and exposure, Bing Ji couldn't catch up to Mo Yan, not even by a dozen streets. Owner, you're too biased. Bing Ji likes you so much, how could you like that cold fellow more? Bing Ji had long felt that Mo Yan wasn't simple, that's why he naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to provoke him again and again, so he rubbed Lu Mu Yan's shoulder with his head and changed the subject. Lu Mu Yan held her forehead. Was this guy really a tier 8 demonic beast? Why did he have no principles or ethics? But with the addition of Bing Ji, their lives had become a lot livelier. Although sometimes he was a bit noisy, but it could also make people unconsciously relax. At the same time, sitting in a towering palace was a cyan-clothed man with a grave and stern appearance, wearing a crown. There was an image condensed from demonic sense in front of him, and within the image were the movements of Lu Mu Yan and her group. Monarch, do they need to be cleaned up? A dark-skinned man stood respectfully beneath the man's throne and asked after looking at the scene in the image. The cyan-clothed man laid his chin on his fist languidly and said in a cold and indifferent voice, as long as they don't step into the thunder zone, you don't need to care. They were just a few Sword King stage sword masters and weren't worth him acting. Not to mention he had long made an agreement with human powerhouses. As long as human sword masters didn't step into the thunder zone, then it wasn't considered an encroachment. Yes. He waved his hand casually and the image in mid-air disappeared instantly. Then he got up and went back to his sleeping quarters. His demonic sense has been withdrawn. Mo Yan stared into the air and suddenly said. Lu Mu Yan nodded. When she first entered this foggy forest, although she couldn't feel the demonic sense Mo Yan spoke of, but she had felt a kind of palpitation of fear in her heart. Now that bad feeling had also disappeared. Her mental energy, ever since the last time in the glacial mountain range where it was condensed into a net and completely depleted, had fallen into a state of dormancy. This was a state where it was accumulating to explode and advance. Now, she could only use a small part of it, so she couldn't detect the opponent's demonic sense. The few people fumbled and walked slowly for a while, then Lu Mu Yan's eyes sharpened. She raised her hand and flicked a few fire blades towards the front left of her, be careful. As soon as her voice fell, everyone heard the densely packed sounds of shoo shoo, and countless icicles sprayed out from the thick fog in front of them, directly attacking them. When approaching, 1/3 of the icicles were melted by Lu Mu Yan's fire blades while the remaining 2/3 were slightly blocked before continuing to fly towards the few other people. But with Lu Mu Yan's reminder and the buffer of the fire blades, the others had long reacted, waving their swords, and numerous sword auras that exuded different colored lights slashed towards the icicles. The sword auras that the few shot out collided with the icicles, and the countless icicles weren't as strong as the sword auras, so they shattered into several pieces, falling to the ground. Yi Qing Han's eyes grew cold and moved 2 fingers. The long sword in his hand suddenly grew bigger and he swung straight towards the front left. A sword aura with a strong wave of elemental energy emerged from the sword and swept out. Squeak squeak. Several icicles larger than before greeted Yi Qing Han's sword aura accompanied by a few rat squeaks. The two converged in midair in the dense fog and the strong purple sword aura swept in an arc, then instantly separated into countless wisps of sword auras. It not only cut down the icicles, but a few wisps also headed towards the front left ere the icicles erupted from. Squeak squeak. A few screams of rats sounded in the thick fog again. The few people exchanged looks, then walked in the direction of the shrieking, each of them activating a layer of elemental energy shields. When they approached that location, the few people saw 3 blue rats around the size of a rabbit watch them vigilantly, ready to attack at any time. One of them was injured by Yi Qing Han's sword aura and was lying on the ground rolling and shrieking, shoo shoo. As soon as the few people approached, the 2 uninjured ice fog rats spat out rows upon rows of icicles, attacking them, filled with killing intent. Lu Mu Yan sneered, snapped her fingers, and pointed her finger towards the sky as she whispered, fireball technique. Following her voice, a wave of heat spread out in the sky above and in a short while, fist-sized fireballs fell continuously from the sky. As soon as the icicles that were shot out touched the fireball, they continuously let off white steam, gradually melting into water droplets. The fireball shot indiscriminately and fell uninterrupted, instantly dissolving all the icicles into droplets of water. But the fireballs didn't stop, and they fell in the direction where the 3 ice fog rats were half squatting. The 2 uninjured ice fog rats instantly ran away, but fireballs would also touch their fur and skin, so their shrieks kept sounding. While that ice fog rat that was already injured and unable to run was even more miserable. The fireballs fell on its body one by one and not long after, the shrieks gradually faded. The body of the ice fog rat was also burned to ashes by the fireball. Seeing the two ice fog rats fleeing while shrieking in one direction, Lu Muyan's eyes grew cold and pinched a seal in her hands. Since the two ice fog rats wanted to attack and kill them secretly, then they should be prepared to be counter-killed. She wouldn't let them have the opportunity to seek help from the Rat King. Just when the two ice fog rats thought they were lucky to have escaped the fireballs and wanted to go find reinforcements, a huge fire wave suddenly surged from ahead of them. Before they could react, they were swallowed by it and also burned to ashes. Mu Yan, has your fire elemental energy reached the state where it could do as your heart pleased? Mu Yi stared at the fireball and fire wave that had disappeared in surprise, and the emotions in his heart didn't tumble any less actively than the fire wave. Comprehending elemental energy law until the state where one could control it as they pleased usually required one to have reached the hurdle of entering a sword sovereign stage from peak phase sword monarch. Only then could one be able to have that revelation. But how did Lu Muyan, who was only at sword king strength, able to do it? While he was shocked, he was also very puzzled. As a master at playing with fire, Shifeng's face couldn't help but change when he saw Lu Muyan control the fire elemental energy as her heart pleased and was also wondering how she did it. Even Yi Qinghan and the other two looked at her in confusion. Lu Muyan brushed her sleeves and smiled faintly, saying, "It's just a technique." The fireball technique was a basic technique that cultivators during the meditation stage could practically all do, but it was laborious and time-consuming to practice it to perfection. It just so happened that when she was at the meditation stage, because her cultivation base was soaring too fast, causing it to be unstable, she used these techniques to practice one by one until perfection, and the rewards were very high. Not only did it stabilize her cultivation base, but it also had miraculous effects against opponents. Not only the scorching flame technique, even water condensing technique, weathering technique and the other techniques had all been practiced by her until the perfection state. The fireball technique she used just now was a type of scorching flame technique. It was originally controlled by spiritual energy, but this continent had a stronger comprehension of the elements, so the effect of using fire elemental energy condensation was better than using spiritual energy. She had indeed reached the state where it did as her heart pleased, but it completely relied on her previous lives' experience and painstaking practice. It wasn't something one could do with just talent. Technique? It's the first time I've seen such a technique. Shifeng rubbed his chin and asked, "Mu Yan, is it convenient for you to tell me the name of your technique?" Scorching flame technique. Lu Muyan didn't conceal it either. Hearing this name, the few people fell into deep thought, but it bore no fruits. They had indeed not heard of this type of technique. These kinds of techniques are actually just some ways to get started with the elements. It wasn't easy to cultivate to perfection, but if you want, I can make a copy of the scorching flame technique on a jade slip for you to study. Lu Muyan said very openly and generously with a smile. This kind of technique was found anywhere in the clans and sects of the immortal cultivation world and wasn't much of a secret at all. If one wanted to cultivate it to perfection, aside from the talent of comprehending the laws, the most important thing was to be able to calm one's heart and ceaselessly train. Since Mu Yi and the others were all interested, it didn't matter if she gifted it to them. Whether they could cultivate it to perfection or not was dependent on their own level of hard work. Isn't that not good? Records of techniques are exceptionally precious. Yi Qinghan shook his head slightly. Although methods weren't as rare as pill formulas and smithing secret books, but was also extremely precious, especially records of techniques they were even rarely found in the public. For example, if a jade slip of the technique Lu Muyan just used was auctioned off at an auction, then the price would definitely be exceptionally high. Mu Yi and Shifeng were extremely excited and there was some burning desire in their eyes. They were in professions that dealt with fire in the long term, so they were naturally very excited about this kind of technique. However, after listening to Yi Qinghan's words, they also thought that Lu Muyan did things freely and generously, but they couldn't take advantage of it. Technique records are hard to come by. I'm indeed really interested in this scorching flame technique, but I can't get it for nothing. With a thought, an extra cyan bead appeared in Mu Yi's hand. This is a water-repelling bead which can activate a layer of light shield for protection and could be used as a defensive magic tool. When used underwater, you can avoid the water current and walk around freely. When worn on you, it also has the effect of warming in winter and cooling in summer. How about I exchange this with you? After listening to him, Lu Muyan became rather interested in this water-repelling bead and jokingly said, "This bead already isn't a common product at first glance. Are you sure you're willing to exchange a middle-level magic treasure for a technique? What's there to be unwilling? Your scorching flame technique is more suitable for my identity as a smith." Mu Yi's persistent love for smithing was no less than Shifeng's love for alchemy. Not to mention he was also a fire lover. Sure, deal. Lu Muyan took out a few empty jade slips and copied the scorching flame technique using mental energy onto it, then threw it to them one by one. Shifeng also gave Lu Muyan an offensive magic treasure on him in exchange. While Yi Qinghan, Ling Fei Yang and Yun Lan's exchange items were rejected by her. Their relationship would appear too distant if even gifting a technique required them to trade something. Mu Yi and Shifeng didn't care about her actions either. Everyone knew the principle that there were differences between close ones and distant ones. They didn't want her to suffer any losses to begin with, and they were even more willing to trade things in exchange for techniques. It was better than owing personal favors. The few took a rest for a bit, then continued to move onwards. After walking for more than 2 hours, the mist in the forest faded a little bit. When they got a foothold, the surrounding scenery suddenly changed. Translated product by Mayar Come True. As soon as one stepped out of the foggy forest, the surrounding scenery suddenly changed. What entered the eye was a deep and quiet narrow path with no end in sight. The two sides of the path were covered with golden thorn bushes and the surroundings were very quiet, though there were still birds flying by in the sky. I wonder which one of the 3 danger areas this is. Mu Yi pressed his lips together tightly as he observed the surroundings. I just feel a sense of oppressiveness. Yi Qing Han stepped forward, then with a thought, he released a big-eared rabbit from his spirit beast ring and threw it onto the narrow path. The few people looked ahead fixedly, only to see the rabbit jumping into the golden thorn bush happily and its life force didn't disappear. Let's go too. Yi Qing Han said. Lu Mu Yen narrowed her eyes and telepathically said to Mo Yen, can you tell if there's anything? I just feel that it's weird here, but even after that rabbit went in, nothing happened, so it should be temporarily safe. Of course, you shouldn't let your guard down. Mo Yen replied. I also think there's definitely a problem here. Oh well, confront soldiers with generals and stem water with Earth 1. Seeing Yi Qing Han and the others step onto the narrow path, Lu Mu Yen cautioned, you should all activate an elemental energy shield and prepare defensive magic tools. It's better to be careful. Upon listening to her, the others didn't consider it much either and they all directly activated an elemental energy shield. They also didn't advance quickly. The narrow path was very deep and quiet, and after walking about a quarter of an hour, there still wasn't any sight of the end. The further they walked inside, more layers upon layers of tall and strong trees with luxuriant leaves enveloped the branches. The sunlight passed through the leaves but was mostly blocked, and the light grew dimmer and dimmer. Lu Mu Yan's mental energy was still dormant, and she couldn't explore the situation ahead. So she told the 3 spirit pets in her sea of consciousness, you 3, pay attention to whether there are any abnormalities around us. Little owner, something's not right here. I keep feeling a very faint aura of demonic beasts secretly overflowing. It should be deliberately hidden. Bing Jis' small eyes rolled around and around as he said cautiously. Mo Yen naturally also found the aura, the being who's here isn't kind. If it isn't that it's proficient in concealment methods, then this piece of golden thorn forest is in its area of control. Meow Meow got out of Lu Mu Yan's sleeve and flicked its tongue irritably ahead, hiss hiss. Because it was still in its infancy, it wasn't able to communicate through the demonic consciousness so it could only vaguely convey a kind of emotion for Lu Mu Yen to feel. Lu Mu Yen stretched out her hand and gently stroked its forehead to soothe it, then said to the few people who were walking together, be prepared to fight. Fight? There's abnormalities? Mu Yi stopped and looked at her in confusion. He had been releasing his mental energy in caution, and he hadn't found any demonic beasts or life forces around. But before Lu Mu Yen could answer, the golden thorn bushes around the path appeared as if they had come alive and suddenly scurried about, turning into slender vines one by one and crept towards the feet of the several people. There are human-eating blood thorn vines hidden in the golden thorn bushes, everyone be careful. Yi Qing Han was a spirit beast master after all, and at this time, also discovered the abnormality. Seeing thorny golden yellow vines sneak out from the cover of the golden thorn bushes, he exclaimed. Hearing what he said, the others took out their long swords and slashed towards the golden vines that were about to wind around their feet. But after only cutting off a few sections of blood thorn vines, more of them slithered out from the golden thorn bushes, wanting to wrap around their feet even faster. Hurry and use fire elemental energy attacks. Yi Qing Han reminded the several people while waving his long sword. The human-eating blood thorn vine was a plant that absorbed human blood and life force. If it cultivated into a spirit, then it could also become a demon cultivator. In addition to demonic beasts, there were also demonic plants in this world. Human-eating blood thorn vines couldn't be killed. As long as its roots weren't dead, it could birth countless twigs and vines to siege and kill living organisms. Even a sword master's fire attribute elemental energy couldn't kill it. Shifeng and Mu Yi were both masters in playing with fire, and their fire elemental energy could also be condensed. The two quickly formed a seal in front of their chests. Suddenly, a giant axe condensed from elemental energy appeared in Shifeng's hand and he slashed down axe after axe towards the surrounding golden vines. A fire snake slithered out from Mu Yi's hand, opened its mouth, and bit towards the golden vines that came up to besiege him. Ling Fei Yang was sitting in the wheelchair with deep, dark eyes, then formed a seal, and more than a dozen firebirds emerged from his hand, instantly spreading their wings, rushing towards the golden vines that were about to wrap around his feet. Neither Yi Qing Han nor Yun Lan had the fire attribute elemental energy, so the two could only use their element sword auras to slay the vines without knowing what weariness was, making it so that the vines couldn't get close. Lu Mu Yen flipped over her slender jade-like hands and fire lotuses floated from her hand. As soon as it touched the golden vines on the ground, they would scatter automatically. The petals of the fire lotuses enveloped the vines and the golden vines instantly turned to ashes. She watched Shifeng and the others' elemental energy condensation and also couldn't resist admiring that the talents of these three people were indeed excelling. With this kind of fire elemental energy condensation and the further study of the scorching fire technique she gave them, once the two effects overlapped, they would surely become an unexpected, invincible killer trump card. Seeing Yunlan and Yi Qing Han strenuously resisting waves of inexhaustible golden vines, the several people also divided their condensed fire elemental energy to help them. Soon, the blood thorn vines that snuck out from the golden thorn bushes gradually diminished and there were piles of ashes in front of them. Squeak! Right when Lu Mu Yen and the others gained the upper hand, a harsh shriek suddenly sounded from within the forest. It's the human-eating blood thorn vine king. Mo Yan's voice entered Lu Mu Yan's ears telepathically. Lu Mu Yen was startled for the moment. She didn't expect that this place could birth such a blood vine king. A human-eating blood thorn vine king was so rare it was difficult to meet even in tens of thousands of years. As long as the human-eating blood-thorn vine king wasn't eliminated, the golden vines would also never be destroyed. After killing a batch, it could immediately reproduce a new bunch of twigs. It was exceptionally difficult to deal with, and if any average human sword masters or demonic beasts met it, they would undoubtedly die. Then her eyes lit up. The principle of interdependence of fortune and misfortune was the same no matter what situation it was used in. Although this human-eating blood-thorn vine was difficult to deal with, but it could grow a type of blood-thorn sac within it. The blood-thorn sac could not only be used to refine pills, but it could also be used to brew spiritual wine. The spiritual wine brewed couldn't only improve one's cultivation base, but it could also improve the physique, increasing the toughness of the body. If she continued to drink it long-term, then her body refining manual definitely would benefit from it a lot. Moreover, the entire body of the blood-thorn vine was a treasure. Aside from the blood-thorn sac that could be used, the vine from the taproot could also be used to refine magic tools, as it was extremely tough, and was a main material that numerous smiths dreamt of. Both the blood-thorn sac and the blood-thorn's main vine was in short supply outside. As long as they appeared on the market, then they'd inevitably cause a frenzied scramble for it, and it could also be sold at high prices at auctions. Lu Muyan's eyes were filled with smiles. Mo Yen. This time we're going to make a fortune. Mo Yen looked at the sky speechlessly. Did this woman become a money grubber? Even Bing Ji couldn't resist twitching his mouth. Wasn't little owner's focus a little wrong? Only Miao Miao kept rubbing against Lu Muyen to show her support. In its heart, owner was always right. Whether you make a fortune or not, I don't know right now, but you're definitely in danger. Mo Yen looked up and solemnly watched the twinkling golden lights ahead of them rolling towards them like waves in the sea. When the golden lights approached, one could tell that they were actually numerous blood-thorn vines with spikes protruding from them. As Mo Yan's voice fell, Lu Muyen raised her head and saw rolls upon rolls of golden vines rushing towards them like tides and mighty waves. What? How come there's so many popping out again? Mu Yi stared at the sight in front of him, stunned. Yi Qing Han's expression was also exceptionally ugly. These human-eating blood-thorn vines are being controlled. What's controlling it? Shifeng asked in befuddlement as he waved the huge axe made from fire elemental energy condensation. He and Mu Yi, one was an alchemist, one was a smith, and they didn't go out a lot throughout the year, so they didn't know much about demonic plants. The shriek just now was the voice of the human-eating blood-thorn vine king. These golden vines should be its branches. Yi Qing Han explained. Then how can we break through? Mu Yi returned to his senses and immediately poured out a pill that replenished elemental energy, then used his fire snake against the golden vines that were rapidly extending in front of him. Yi Qing Han's eyes were solemn, and his tone was helpless. We must find the place where the human-eating blood-thorn vine king is and kill it to get out of the trap. Otherwise these blood-thorn vines will be like weeds, unable to be burnt completely. At this time, the few people formed a small circle, constantly fighting against the golden vines that were as if they were bearing fangs and brandishing claws. Be careful not to get pierced by the thorns on the vines, otherwise your body will be paralyzed for a period of time. Although it's only a few breaths, but after losing your combat ability, you'll become their food. What Yi Qing Han comprehended wasn't the fire attribute elemental energy, so he could only caution everyone while wielding his long sword without giving up, keeping the mentality that however many he could cut was how many that counted. Mobilizing the fire element condensation to battle took a lot of elemental energy and physical strength. Shifeng and the others continued to take pills as sweat covered their foreheads, and they began to struggle. Lu Muyan's face slightly sunk. Her two hands kept pinching seals, and not long after, a fiery red light cover appeared, enveloping the few people and enclosing them within. A wave of heat hit the surrounding space and fires fell from the sky, all smashing against the golden vines and tendrils that were attempting to attack the flame shield. Squeak! Several shrill shrieks came from within the depths of the vines covered in flames. The golden vines that hadn't been burnt to ashes retreated one after another, hovering not far away, swaying the vines to express indignation. On the narrow path, Lu Muyen and the others formed a stalemate with the golden-colored vines. The few people were trapped in a small circle by the vines from all directions, and even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't rush out. Lu Muyen took out a few bottles of spiritual energy replenishing pills and threw them to the others. Quickly replenish your elemental energy. Their new wave of attack is coming soon. After she finished speaking, she picked up a porcelain bottle and poured pills ceaselessly into her mouth. The spiritual energy replenishing pills melted the moment they entered her mouth, and the spiritual energy flowed through the meridians in her entire body to replenish her dantian. But this wasn't a good way to continue. Even if she had a lot of spiritual energy replenishing pills, but it wouldn't be able to stand such usage. These golden-colored vines were simply an endless cycle of dying then returning. Furthermore, their elemental energy could be replenished with pills, but it was difficult for their physical body to keep up. Suddenly, a few sturdy human-eating blood-thorn vines drilled out from beneath Yi Qing Han and Yunlan's foot, swiftly entangled their feet, then dragged them down. Be careful underground. Mo Yen and Bing Jis voice echoed in Lu Muyan's sea of consciousness at the same time. Lu Muyan's eyes grew cold. Her mental energy was dormant, so she couldn't detect the fluctuations underground at all. Not to mention the human-eating blood-thorn vine was exceptionally skilled in concealing its aura. Even when Mo Yen and Bing Ji noticed and reminded everyone, they were also a step too late. Yi Qinghan and Yunlan were already dragged into the ground by the vines that had suddenly emerged and wrapped around their foot. Qinghan, Yunlan. Shocked, Mu Yi quickly mobilized the fire snake to burn the thick vines. But a scene that made them all slightly despair occurred. The condensed fire elemental energy burning on the few vines that emitted a dark golden light were completely useless. They could only helplessly watch the two being dragged away and disappear. Lu Muyen furrowed her brows. It seemed that these thick dark golden vines were the main force. She mobilized the spiritual energy of her entire body, pinched seals, and let out a soft yell, "Rise." A giant lifelike fire dragon rose from behind her and roared into the air, then dived into the ground where Yi Qinghan and Yunlan just disappeared from. Will they be alright? Mu Yi used his mental energy to probe underground but found nothing. Ling Fei Yang knitted his brows tightly. There's no life-threatening concerns for now, but that human-eating blood-thorn vine demonic plant already bore intelligence, so it must be difficult to deal with. That demonic plant could see that what Yi Qinghan and Yunlan comprehended wasn't the fire attribute elemental energy law, so they weren't a big threat to it. But they were the easiest to catch, so it snuck from underground to attack, and as expected, it succeeded. Lu Muyen took out 2 more bottles of pills and kept pouring them into her mouth. Then her eyes sharpened, and she enhanced the light cover with fire elemental energy again. The golden-colored vines that were waving about and slapping as if they were bearing fangs and brandishing claws were completely blocked outside the light enclosure. But the golden-colored vines weren't giving up as they continued to slap, tentatively attempting to pierce the flame cover. The 3 of them saw Lu Muyen's complexion start to turn pale and a layer of dense sweat rose on her nose. They also knew that she couldn't maintain the flame cover for long, so after quickly consuming the spiritual energy replenishing pills, they mobilized their fire elemental energy to help support the light cover together. A faint despair was also born unconsciously in their hearts. Would they perish here today? However, all of them were determined and tenacious. They quickly tossed that kind of despair behind them. No one could tell the result until the very last moment. In order to survive, they couldn't lose their confidence. Lu Muyen saw that the 3 people's condensed fire elemental energy was just enough to maintain the functioning of the fire light cover. She looked deeply in the direction where the 2 had been dragged away and said, "You all hold on for a moment. I'll come back as soon as possible." After speaking, she didn't wait for anyone to answer either. She used her spiritual energy to mobilize 2 flying swords, placing them in front of her and drilled into the ground where the 2 people were dragged away. The flying swords kept spinning, stirring up the surrounding soil as she chased in the direction of the fire Aragon's aura. She had seen the introduction of the blood-thorn vine on the Tianling continent's demonic beast and demonic plants record. She found that this type of blood-thorn vine's habits were almost the same as the blood-thorn vines in the immortal cultivation world, so she could use the same method to deal with it. She once obtained a recipe for brewing blood sac wine in the inheritance of the heavenly grade alchemist, so she had searched for the human-eating blood-thorn vine in the spiritual world for ages. Ultimately, hard work didn't let down those who tried, and she found a king, then used a means to suppress it and made it surrender. At this time, although her cultivation base wasn't as high as the human-eating blood-thorn vine, but she had some confidence in dealing with it. After all, her blood sac wine was still waiting for the blood-thorn sac of this human-eating blood-thorn vine king to be put in the pot. No matter how difficult it was, even if she had to use her all and her trump cards, she would definitely defeat it. Of course, not wanting Yi Qinghan and the others to die here was an important reason and determination for why she didn't want to, and couldn't, give up. Lu Muyan's heart tightened, then she sped up going deeper underground. Not good. Yi Qinghan and Yunlan were entangled and were about to approach the main body of the human-eating blood-thorn vine king danger. When Lu Muyen heard that excited call, her heart tightened. She mobilized her spiritual energy to gather into her long swords, quickly chasing the fire dragon. After going a further few hundred meters deeper underground, the fire dragon shifted its direction and Lu Muyen followed closely behind. After a while, the fire dragon chased upwards with a swish. It seems like the human-eating blood-thorn vine king is right up there, Bing Ji said while looking at the place not far away. Lu Muyen had a deep chill in her eyes. If this demon vine dared to touch Yi Qinghan and Yunlan, then she wouldn't want its blood-thorn sac anymore. Only by burning it could she relieve her hatred. However, she didn't chase in the direction of the fire dragon again, but instead ceaselessly formed newer territory ahead. Little owner, are you not going to chase in the direction of the fire dragon? The human-eating blood-thorn vine king is right on top. Bing Ji asked in confusion. Lu Muyen mobilized the double swords forward while saying, I naturally have my own way to deal with it. Bing Ji rolled his eyes. The target was just above, how could she deal with if she came here instead and didn't follow it upwards? Mo Yan's eyes were still indifferent, but it hid an understanding. You want to try destroying its roots? As expected, Mo Yan is smart. Lu Muyen said. Bing Ji glared at Mo Yan. This kid would just always come out to please people at the critical moments. Mo Yan replied with a cold look and Bing Ji instantly felt that the feathers on his body were about to stand up on its ends. This damned spirit devourer had raised suppression against him. Finally, he cursed Mo Yan in his heart repeatedly and only then did he feel more comfortable. As Lu Muyen was moving forward, a sliver of spiritual sense was also attached to the fire dragon. After knowing that the dark golden vines entangled the 2 of them and dragged them to the place above but didn't do anything for the time being, she gently sighed with relief. While mobilizing the fire dragon to hover over the 2 people's heads, readying it to fight with the human-eating blood-thorn vine king, she also stopped in a place. What entered her eye was the thick root system wrapped in dark golden-colored bark. Each root system also had countless red threads, just like blood vessels. The root system had been extended to a very deep underground place and spiritual force was being absorbed by its root system incessantly. Lu Muyan's eyes sharpened. Without any hesitation, she flipped her right hand and a cluster of purple golden-colored flames jumped out of her palm, prepared to act. Who knew that this demon tree is only at initial phase tier 6 cultivation base? Bing Ji scanned the aura of the demonic plant opposite him, pursed his lips and said casually. Lu Muyan rolled her eyes at him. Demonic plants have it much harder in cultivating than demonic beasts. Initial phase tier 6 strength isn't at all weaker than a late phase tier 6 demonic beast. Not to mention that it's a king. In order for a plant to become a spurt and gain intelligent was hundreds or even thousands of times more difficult than demonic beasts. That's why demonic plants were exceptionally rare. Each high-level demonic plant birthed could basically sweep out demonic beasts at the same tier. A demonic beast could transform into human form at tier 7 while demonic plants needed to be at tier 8, at tier 6 it could only communicate using demonic sense, and only at tier 7 could it speak the human language. Each step was a tier slower, but its strength was even stronger. It was useless to deal with such a demonic plant using ordinary fire elemental energy. Of course, if it were a human sword master 2 stages higher than a demonic plant and who could use fire elemental energy, then they could definitely cause damage towards it. Her cultivation level wasn't enough, so the only thing that could restrain it was mutant flames. If she hadn't subdued the purple golden spirit flame, then she wouldn't dare rush in so easily and take abuse herself. After all, although she had the ability to challenge higher stages, but the demonic plant also had that ability, and it was countless times more difficult to deal with than her. She noticed that a powerful aura appeared above, directly waving its vines and sent the bound Yi Qing Han and Yunlan towards it. The fire dragon kept burning the dark golden-colored vines, but it was of little use. Go. So she said without hesitation, and the purple gold spirit flame was as if it had come alive, turning into a blooming purple peony, and floated out. As soon as the peony touched the main root system of the human-eating blood thorn vine king, the other party shrank swiftly as if it had seen a ghost, but it was too large and could barely move a few steps. Crackle. Several sounds of burning vines resounded and a faint burnt smell spread in the underground soil. Squeak squeak. A loud and shrill cry sounded. The sturdy tree roots that intertwined deep in the ground actually broke away from the soil and flicked in Lu Muyan's direction as if it had come alive, one by one. There was also a very indignant demonic sense telepathic voice that was heard. Human, today I must tear you into thousands of pieces. It had been 1,000 years she had never suffered such humiliation and pain. The power of the flame just now made him feel strong danger. He must kill this danger. Meanwhile, also kill the human that dared to set him on fire, tearing them into countless pieces of flesh and blood to serve as the nourishment for his roots. Just with you, an ugly demonic plant? Lu Muyan huffed coldly, flipped her hands, and numerous purple peonies instantly floated down. When they met the tree roots that were flicking towards her, they fell piece by piece from the stamens and melted into the dark golden-colored tree roots. Screech screech. A few more shrieks sounded. All the tree roots that were merged with the purple golden petals made a crackle sound, accompanied by a burning smell. Damned human, if you have the guts then come up and fight me head-on. The human-eating blood thorn vine king was extremely angry but could do nothing. That purple-colored spirit flame was the nemesis of all them demonic plants and they'll become trash the moment they touch it. Just now, when his huge root system touched the flame, it had become completely unable to regenerate. His heart was bleeding. Those were the root systems on which he depended for survival. Pfft. Lu Muyan sneered, and the movements of her hands didn't stop as she specifically attacked the relatively weaker roots using the purple gold spirit flame. Do you think I'm a fool? You deserve to die. The human-eating blood thorn vine king was truly infuriated this time. The roots of the tree suddenly began to change, becoming shorter and thinner. He was the blood thorn vine king, so he naturally occupied the place with the most abundant spiritual force and could also move at will. Now that he was restrained by the purple flames, he could only shorten and shrink his rhizomes so that the human couldn't easily burn them. Lu Muyan sneered and condensed several Taoist seals in midair, shooting them one by one to the place that the tree roots of the human-eating blood thorn vine king had occupied before. Seal. After forming the last Taoist seal with her hands, she slapped it down hard. More than a dozen jade-colored runes emerged from all directions, intertwining together to form a dense net from all sides, trapping the human-eating blood thorn vine king that had shrunk countless times within. When she first saw such huge rhizomes earlier, she just knew that it'd be too laborious to deal with the human-eating blood thorn vine king by just relying on the purple gold spirit flame. It was easy to escape by just shrinking the entire tree root like he did. So from the moment she entered here, she hid her hands in her sleeves, pinching seals and arranging talisman arrays. As long as the human-eating blood thorn vine king was trapped and couldn't move to escape or attack her in wide ranges, she could make him obedient. As her voice fell, the dense net of jade-colored rays of light flourished in all directions and turned into a high wall of dozens of meters, circling with runes, compressing towards the human-eating blood thorn vine king.